Kevin Costner, James Earl Jones, Ray Liotta, Burt Lancaster, Amy Madigan, Timothy Busfield, Dwyer Brown. When we think of Field of Dreams, these are the faces seared into our brains. These are the performers who brought W.P. Kinsella's characters and Phil Alden Robinson's characters to life. But what if? What if it hadn't been Burt Lancaster, with Burt Lancaster's voice and Burt Lancaster's style, saying to Ray, quote, "I never got to bat in the major leagues. I would have liked to have had that chance, just once, to stare down a big league pitcher, to stare him down, and just as he goes into his windup, wink, make him think you know something he doesn't." End quote. Can you hear Burt Lancaster? Can you imagine anyone else delivering those lines? But there were others, other actors, other choices. Burt Lancaster, for instance, was not the first choice, nor was Kevin Costner. But who were these others? When I spoke with casting director Marjorie Simkin, she said she couldn't remember other actors who'd auditioned, who'd wanted, who'd begged for these roles. She said that these names were forever lost to time. Well, I found them, buried deep within the Academy of Motion Picture archives, actual notebooks compiled by Marjorie Simkin 35 years ago, with names, hundreds of names, dates, and times, and wonderfully handwritten notes by Simkin. Notes like goofy and giggly, or too cartoony, or not funny. For one person auditioning for the role of a ball player, she wrote, "Over my dead body." I'd like to know what that audition looked like to garner such a comment. When I first saw these pages, I felt a shiver run up the back of my neck. I felt like I was 6 again, under the Christmas tree, tearing the wrapping from my first present. And now I'd like to share that feeling with you. We're moving along in the timeline of Field of Dreams. The crew has been assembled for the film still called Shoeless Joe. Now, who will play these iconic roles? Tonight we'll have some fun, shaking the alternate reality snow globe as we consider names like Robin Williams, Annette Bening, and Jim Carrey. We'll also unfold the fascinating stories of the men and women who made the final cut and secured roles in this little film that would go on to change their lives in so many ways.
This book really should have never been written. The film should have never been made.
I sort of have this feeling that one of the reasons I was born, was to be part of this, to get this out into the culture.
What they didn't count on was the word of mouth, that people would see it and then just say, "Oh my God, you have to go see this movie." It ended up defying the odds.
Midnight Library of Baseball presents Season 2, The Making of Field of Dreams. I'm Ben Orlando. We've already come a long way from W.P. Kinsella and his short story, from Lawrence Kesnick convincing Kinsella to write a novel, from Phil Alden Robinson spending years telling the story to anyone who would listen. Now the film has been greenlit. Robinson has overcome his initial anxiety. Now he and production manager Brian Frankish and casting director Marjorie Simkin will whittle a list of thousands to select a few. But even before the ink has dried on contracts, one name starts bobbing to the surface. Robin Williams, for the lead role of Ray Kinsella. At this point in the late 1980s, Williams had done Good Morning Vietnam and had just shot Dead Poets Society. There were also rumors that Tom Hanks was offered and declined the role. And of the people originally considered, Kevin Costner was not on the list. From writer-director Phil Alden Robinson.
We did not have Kevin Costner on the list because he had just made Bull Durham. It was hard to believe a movie star would make one baseball movie because they were considered box office poison. It was impossible to believe they'd do 2 in a row. Josh Donnan, who was an executive at Universal at the time, ran into Kevin at a restaurant and said, "Hey, we've got this script. I think you'd like it." And he snuck the script to him. And Kevin called the next day and said, "I really like this. I understand, you may be out to someone else. I don't want to take a job away from an actor, but if it becomes available, call me." And when I heard that, I just said, stop everything else. That's the guy. That's who we want.
In an interview, Kevin Costner remembered asking Phil Alden Robinson, "Hey, why did you not go with Robin Williams, who was a bigger star at the time?" And Robinson replied, "Because we wanted someone the audience wouldn't believe could hear voices. And I could easily see Robin Williams hearing voices." Not only did Costner come aboard as the lead role, but he gave Robinson something else that was invaluable. Again, from Phil Alden Robinson.
I had breakfast with Kevin like the next day. I had a great breakfast with him where I stammered a lot. And I said, "Look, I just want to make a film that has a chance for people to say that's the best film ever made." And he said, "I love that kind of talk." He said, "I am so behind you." He says, "You will feel a lot of pressure to make changes. There'll be pressure from the studio. There'll be pressure from within you and things aren't." He said, "I'll be the little voice behind your shoulder whispering in your ear, don't change a word." And that support from a movie star for a young director and a young unproven director is just gold. It's just gold.
So, lead role locked up. Great. What about Ray's wife, Annie? Bring in Jamie Lee Curtis. Imagine Ray's carefree, goofy, energetic wife played by Jamie Lee Curtis. Or Frances McDormand, who also was considered and turned down for the role. Or how about 80s star of China Beach, Dana Delaney? Or Jennifer Tilly? No, 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 and no. So the search for Annie continued. The one role that was nearly cemented even before Ray Kinsella was Terrence Mann, because Phil Alden Robinson wrote the part for James Earl Jones. As we previously discussed in prior episodes, the original reclusive writer character, J.D. Salinger, was not going to work in the film for a variety of reasons. First, Salinger or Salinger's lawyers threatened a lawsuit if he was included in the film. But as Phil Alden Robinson explained in episode 6,
I just felt like J.D. Salinger. He's asked only one thing of us all these years, to be left alone. And it's a reasonable request, and I think we should honor it.
When Robinson was rewriting the character, he had this thought. Who would it be fun to see Ray try to kidnap? And while he was watching the Broadway play Fences, he took in James Earl Jones, and he thought, that's my guy. Before we shift a little to James Earl Jones, I just want to pause to explain how absolutely unusual it is for a character to change in such a drastic way from book to the big screen. But of course, fiction rarely contains real-life people. And if it does, those people are rarely still alive during the book's publication. So this whole strange situation, stemming from the whole strange creative universe of W.P. Kinsella, led to J.D. Salinger exiting the scene and opening a space for James Earl Jones. It was Jones's wife, Cecilia Hart, who first read the script in 1988. And she told Jones, "You have to do this film." But, she said, that great speech you give at the end, they'll never include it. It will get cut during production. But, of course, the speech was not cut. More on that later. So James Earl Jones, already known for Broadway, the film Coming to America, and playing the voice of Darth Vader in the 3 Star Wars films, was now on board. And years later, when he was asked about his film career and his enormous body of work, James Earl Jones said Field of Dreams was, quote, one of the very few movies I've done that I really cherish, end quote. The next iconic role to fill was that of Doc Graham. And Phil Alden Robinson had someone in mind from the start.
For Doc Graham, I wanted Jimmy Stewart. And part of that was, I thought that Doc Graham was a movie star in his town. He was a star of his town. And I thought it'd be great to have a movie star play that role. Plus, Kevin was now a bona fide movie star of this generation. And I thought to put him with a movie star of a previous generation would be pretty sweet. Plus, Jimmy Stewart has this resonance with this kind of a story. You know, between Harvey and It's a Wonderful Life, he belongs in this story. And we sent the script to him, and we just heard through his agent that he had passed on the script. And I didn't get a chance to talk to him or try to convince him. I found out much later. I heard two things. One is that, you know, he was retired, his health wasn't great, and he wasn't sure he wanted to act in a film. Also, he wasn't sure he wanted to play a character who dies. And I thought, oh, I wish I'd known that, because I could have told him you don't. You don't really die in this movie.
So they had to find another bona fide star, and specifically a former athlete.
When he turned us down, we then made a list of other, and I just said movie stars, you know, and Burt Lancaster is a bona fide movie star. Plus, as a young man, he had been an athlete, and it was important to me that you believe this old man was once, in his youth, an athlete, and Burt had that.
What you're describing there too, and wanting to believe that he's an athlete because he was, like, that feels like from a writer's perspective, you're just writing this huge backstory that just gets cut out, right? But you know, and it somehow
Right.
comes through in the character.
Yeah.
What kind of athlete was Burt Lancaster? Well, if you can believe it, in the 1930s, Lancaster had performed as a circus acrobat. It's funny, in thinking about other actors playing a role, I often have a hard time. But as much as I love Burt Lancaster, I can also picture Stewart in the role and doing a good job. And it would be a very different performance. Jimmy Stewart's focusiness to Burt Lancaster's old world class. Both strong for their own reasons. And what about the role of Annie? Marjorie Simpkin and Phil Alden Robinson brought in more actresses. Annette Bening? Nope. Megan Mullally, the famous co-star from Will and Grace? Also no. Kathleen York, who those of you West Wing fans out there know as Andrea Wyatt, or Andy, Toby's ex-wife, also auditioned, and also did not get the part. So they're still looking. Then there's the role of Mark, the brother-in-law, and the only quote-unquote nefarious character in the story. Paging through this treasure trove notebook, I see some famous men who auditioned for the role of Mark, including Woody Harrelson and John Goodman. But after a few auditions, Phil Alden Robinson thought he'd found his guy.
And there was an actor who came in to read for the role of Mark, who was great. And I loved him. And I just said, home run, I'm using this guy. When I brought Margie on, we're talking about different roles, and she said, oh, and you know, for Mark, I want to bring in Tim Busfield. I said, I got a Mark. I got a guy, he's great. And she said, you should see Tim Busfield, he's really good. I said, the guy on 30-something. I said, I don't want somebody who's on a TV show. I want this to be different, and you associate him with this television show. I don't think it's the right feel. And she said, you need to see him. And I've learned to trust her, so I said, all right, bring him in. And he came in and was just, wow. he was right off the bat just great, spontaneous, natural, really interesting, and he had it all, and just blew us away in the room, and blew us away without bombastic acting. It was just very naturalistic and quirky, and he was great. But that's what a good casting director can do, and a great casting director can do, is show you people that you wouldn't have thought possible for that scene.
Marjorie Simkin didn't know Timothy Busfield from auditioning. She knew him as a reader who would help her out from time to time. Hi, Tim. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks so much for doing this with me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure, Ben.
So you're in New Mexico, Santa Fe area?
No, I'm in Albuquerque right now.
Okay.
I'm the directing producer of a TV show called The Cleaning Lady for Fox.
Okay.
They were a Fox network TV show, and I direct and produce the show.
When I sat down with Timothy Busfield, I let him know right off the bat I was a huge fan, especially for his work as Danny Concannon on The West Wing. He was also the star of the TV show 30-something, which was running at the time of casting for Field of Dreams. How are you at taking compliments?
I like them.
Okay. And I've talked to so many people, and people say, "Well, are you talking to Kevin Costner? Are you going to talk to Kevin Costner?" And really, for me, the person I wanted to talk to was you. So this is really exciting for me.
Well, I appreciate that. You still want to talk to Kevin, though. He's pretty great. He's pretty great.
In my research, one of the biggest surprises so far, and I know I keep saying this, but it keeps happening, so what are you going to do? But one of my biggest surprises was that Timothy Busfield, in addition to being a fantastic actor, director, and producer, is also a successful and honored professional baseball player. You're in the Hall of Fame. You're in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
I'm in the Sacramento Baseball Hall of Fame. I am.
Yeah.
And I'm very, very honored to be there.
And the timing of it too. So can you talk a little bit about how that came to be and your history and experience with baseball?
Well, I mean, I grew up, my next door neighbor was drafted by the San Francisco Giants out of college and was lettered in every sport in college and was a great athlete and ran the Little League. And my brother and I just sort of learned how to play baseball under this guy, John Fusak. So I played all through high school and was picked up to play with the semi-pro team starting at about 16 and played semi-pro ball in LA and won a couple championships for teams there. And when I was in Sacramento, I was still in my early 30s, 35 actually. And the semi-pro team shared there was a baseball field that shared a parking lot with my theater. And I said, "Can I throw you batting practice?" And the coach said, "No, get out of here." And somebody said Field of Dreams, and he said, "What? Field of Dreams?" Then he called me back over, and he said, "All right." I threw batting practice, and he said, "You got a cup?" I said, "Yeah, I got a cup." "Yep, sure, Skip." And I threw batting practice, and then he said, "Come on out and throw a couple innings for a publicity stunt." And I spent 9 years as a pitcher with that team.
Busfield was teammates with players who'd been former major leaguers, or who would one day make it to the major leagues. In all of the professional baseball Hollywood crossover stories, Timothy Busfield may have the most unlikely, as he came back to professional baseball at the age of 35, 3 years after Field of Dreams. And then he went on to pitch for 9 seasons, posting a 30-12 win-loss record, and eventually getting inducted into the Sacramento Smokies Hall of Fame. I mean, come on. What a great Field of Dreams story. Well, I talked to Marjorie Simkin and I talked to Phil and Robinson, and she brought you in, and Phil had been set on some other actor, and he said she's like, no, you should really see this guy. And then you came in and he was convinced.
Margie Simpkin, boy, she is, those guys. Margie Simpkin, I was a reader for when I was and when you're young and you don't, you sometimes you'll read with casting directors, read other people.
Wow. So when you say that you were a reader, you were just going opposite other people that they were trying to cast.
Yeah, I know. I was helping those people. So if I'm a reader, like Michelle Pfeiffer would come in, and I remember her coming in to read for Brazil, and I was playing all the other characters in the story.
But in 1988, Busfield was a star on the TV drama 30-something, and he had already been offered a role in another baseball movie with his friend Mark Harmon.
It was more money, and it was playing a baseball player, and I had this Field of Dreams script, and I said no. At first they sent it to me. They didn't tell me what part. And at that point, I was a lead on 30-something. It could have been that they wanted me for Kevin's role, but I read it and I thought, no, I know how to play the brother. I know how to get the audience to jump over me into the fantasy. I think I can help that. I think the thing that Phil liked, honestly, was that for me, it was that I loved my sister. And I wasn't just the bad guy. I wasn't a stereotypical bad guy to him. That the base of Mark was, he just didn't get it, but he loved his sister, and so it was really another emotion driving him, other than just the sort of in the book. It's sort of a team of greed, and this was able to bring in a little more love. Margie Simpkin, boy, I owe her that. A lot of us, boy, when I saw that list of Margie's list that you sent me, the amount of people that wanted to be in that movie.
Yeah. Woody Harrelson, John Goodman, they auditioned for that part.
They auditioned for my part?
Yeah.
I know Woody Harrelson did. I didn't know Goodman did.
If you think this show's worth $1, please donate at the website midnightlibraryofbaseball.com or through Podbean. You can also leave a rating or review on iTunes or wherever you listen to the podcast. Okay, back to the show. One of the more contentious casting choices, especially to baseball purists, was Ray Liotta for the part of Shoeless Joe Jackson. From casting director Marjorie Simkin.
Years later, I was attacked at a party by a Vivid fan who not of the movie, but a baseball fan, telling me that how could I have possibly had anything to do with casting him because he was, I guess, right-handed and Joe was left-handed.
Yeah.
This was, a great miscarriage of justice. And why didn't they flip the film and all this kind of crazy stuff.
People also complained that Ray Liotta's character was too well-spoken, whereas the real Shoeless Joe was illiterate with a thick Southern accent. In an interview, Phil Alden Robinson had a good reply. He said, quote, there is a bigger inaccuracy no one has picked up on in how we portrayed Shoeless Joe. The real Shoeless Joe Jackson is dead, and we show him walking around, talking to people. It's fiction, folks, end quote. And to Ray Liotta's credit, he did try to learn to bat left-handed, but after a while, hitting coach Rod Dedeaux and Phil Alden Robinson thought it better that he looked good swinging the bat from whatever side of the plate. And when it comes to casting, Marjorie Simkin did not and does not care about left-handed or right-handed batting.
To me, the important thing with that character, as he was written in the script, was that he have tremendous presence. And the thing was, we didn't have a lot of money, so we couldn't hire a famous person. And also it was a tiny role in many ways. So nobody who was really big was interested in playing it. So it was all about finding somebody like Ray Liotta who was on the cusp. That is what one was looking for.
Well, what you're talking about of searching for the deeper elements of people, that really penetrates viewers who are watching and hits them more deeply than some random fact or statistic about whether somebody bats right or left-handed.
Right.
And
he couldn't, apparently, years later, Rod told me I owed him one, because it was a challenge to make him look like a ball player. He was not in any way, shape, or form talented in that arena. But it didn't matter. I mean, what really matters is what you're talking about. What matters is, does it move you as a character in this story doing what that character does?
For her job, Simkin had to watch different people, and the same people, act out the same scene over and over and over again. It can get monotonous. You can lose focus. But according to Simkin,
when you do my job, you see these scenes that you use as audition scenes. You see them again and again and again and again, and then about 1,000 times more. But the truth is, when somebody nails it in one way or another, and by nails it, I don't mean does it the way I imagined it. I mean, does something that grabs your attention and makes you pay attention. In some ways, when you've seen 50 and then one is great, it's all the more telling.
this is what happened for Marjorie Simkin during auditions for the role of the father, John Kinsella.
So I had seen all of these people audition for this part. And the thing about that scene is it's so well written that even with me reading the other part, sitting in an office, the scene worked every single time. It never didn't work. It never didn't move me in the room, me reading it over and over and over again.
The scene Marjorie Simkin is referring to is, of course, the final scene of the film, where Ray Kinsella and his father, John Kinsella, speak to each other for the first time.
And then Dwyer walked in, and there was that thing, that match of part to person, which isn't about typecasting. I think people misunderstand. I think a lot of actors, young actors, misunderstand that it is, when you say somebody fit, that it was because they looked the way you imagined them. It isn't about a look, it's about a feeling. And he had that combination of an innocence and a sincerity that was exactly what you needed at that moment, because you had the power from the Ray Liotta part. So that was a different kind of energy that you wanted. And then what you needed from the dad was, warmth, nostalgia, all of those evocative things. And it was, of course, a tremendous plus in my mind that there is something, or there was at the time, something almost vintage looking about the way that he looks, that evokes an era. And I don't know how to verbalize what that is, but I think if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. And it was it.
For Dwyer Brown, this role was the culmination of a prayer.
Hi, Dwyer.
Hang on. Sorry about this, Ben. I'm sadly in the wrong century.
It's hard to keep up, for sure.
Well, yeah, it's harder still when you just don't want to.
Dwyer Brown was raised on a small farm in Ohio. And while initially his dream of becoming an actor in Hollywood came true, he couldn't break free of playing the character who was eventually killed off. As he wrote in his book, If You Build It, a book about father's fate in Field of Dreams, quote, "Over the previous 5 years, I had been shot to death 6 times, died of a heart attack, been lynched and knifed, and in the Thornbirds, run over by a wild pig. If expiring repeatedly in various roles wasn't a metaphor for my dying career, I don't know what was." End quote. In 1986, getting ready for a costume party, where Brown was dressed as Jimmy Stewart, he looked in the mirror and made a deal with God. From his book, quote, "I told God that if he would put me in just one meaningful film, like It's a Wonderful Life, I would try to use that opportunity to help people." End quote.
And I'm remembering something that Marjorie said, and just being able to see something in somebody and seeing that in you and what you will bring and how it's who you are and it's where you're coming from and all the things that you experienced that are coming out in your performance.
Right. And, my dad was alive and well when I auditioned and got the part, and yeah, to think that was still in my, in my near future and I didn't know about it. And yeah, I'm just grateful. You audition and audition and audition and hope for that. If I hadn't looked enough like Kevin to be his dad, I probably wouldn't have gotten a call back either. There's an awful lot of things that contribute to, that one little moment that you get,
Brown recalled looking down at the sign-in sheet before his audition for John Kinsella. As a policy, he tried not to look at the sign-up sheets because the names on those sheets could be intimidating. And even with this policy, on this day, while auditioning for the part of the father in Shoeless Joe, Brown caught sight of the sheet and saw the name Jim Carrey. So much for cool and composed. In preparation for the audition, Brown read and reread not only the script but the novel Shoeless Joe. He understood what John Kinsella wanted, to be forgiven by his son and to let Ray know he loved him, but all this had to come through without saying it. In real life, Dwyer Brown had had plenty of practice on the other side of this role.
In real conversations, we rarely say what we mean directly. It's usually some couched sort of thing.
Right.
I don't remember my dad saying I love you, but he sent me one letter in his life, and all he did was talk about a squirrel in the backyard. And it means so much to me because it was the only letter he sent me, and that's what he talked about was this crazy squirrel, I might be reading into it, but for me, it symbolizes, everything he ever did for me, in this distracted way, because that generation was so limited in how they could express soft feelings. And, it made it hard, I think, for a lot of us who were the children of that generation.
Dwyer Brown did not remember much of the audition, and of course, he got the part. Over the next years and decades, he would make good on his promise to God. He would use this role to give back tenfold. In addition to Jim Carrey, some of the other names on the sign-up sheet callback list were Bradley Whitford, who played Josh Lyman in The West Wing, and Clark Gregg, who also starred in The West Wing and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and other superhero films. Marjorie Simpkin said they auditioned more than 100 men for the part of the father. But for Simpkin, one of the most difficult parts to cast was the role of Karen, Ray's daughter. And if you remember the film and what was required of this little girl, it makes sense. As Simpkin put it, they were searching for a child who was both childlike but also wise beyond their years. Because in the film, Karen, the little girl, becomes embodied by this wise being who prophesizes what will happen. Marjorie Simpkin and Phil Alden Robinson saw many little girls, but it wasn't until a chance occurrence that Simpkin felt the spark with Gaby Hoffmann.
I actually had a really nice thing happen last year. I ran into Gaby at a party. I had not seen her in maybe since she was a kid. And I told her the story I'm about to tell you. And I don't think she knew it because she was 6. And so what do any of us remember from when we're 6, right? You know, a second here and a second there. But I was working on another project and I was looking through a Vanity Fair on my desk. I wasn't a big magazine reader. A magazine someone else had left in that office. And there was a photo of Gaby with her mother, who was one of Andy Warhol's factory folk. And it was this photo of the two of them. And I looked at this picture of this kid and I got to find her. She didn't have an agent. I tracked her down through the magazine, through the photographer, and she was living with her mom in the Chelsea Hotel, downtown New York. So I went down to meet with Viva, and Gaby was there, and they had 2 little couches in the lobby, and there was a wooden, like a piece of wood between the two, and she was walking tightrope in a slightly dangerous mode. And I just went to Phil and said, I called him and said, I think this girl is amazing. And, you know, then she did come in and audition, but she was fabulous. She was just one of those kids who kind of had to grow up maybe a little fast because of the life she was living. I mean, you find people, you just keep looking, you know, you never know. And so much, you know, I've come to realize over the years, so many things happen by accident, you know, just totally by accident. I mean, it was an accident that I had that magazine.
Now we return to the hardest role to cast, that of Ray's wife, Annie. From executive producer and production manager Brian Frankish.
Not a lot of people weighed in on what was going on, except the casting of Amy Madigan. There was Phil. She wasn't his first choice. Matter of fact, she wasn't in the first running at all. I mean, we had every top actress in Hollywood coming in and reading.
And as I'm flipping through these audition sheets, it's astounding the sheer number of actresses who not only auditioned, but were called back to audition again and again. Like Karen Allen, famous for her leading lady role alongside Harrison Ford in the first Indiana Jones. There's Catherine O'Hara, known for the mother in Home Alone, among many standout roles. There's Nancy Travis, Celia Ward, Laurie Metcalf, Cheryl Ladd of Charlie's Angels fame, and Kate Capshaw, also known for Indiana Jones. It goes on and on. From casting director Marjorie Simpkin.
That was a long process.
Yeah.
That was a very long process where, you know, lots of people had lots of input. You know, it was early enough in my career that I didn't really understand, and it happened subsequently. So I think a little bit of what goes on is everybody has their own image of what an ideal wife is. And there were a lot of male decision makers weighing in on what an ideal wife was, and they weren't all in accord. Let's put it that way. So it's always an interesting thing to observe.
So the callbacks continued, and many actresses came back and read scenes with Kevin Costner. As Phil Alden Robinson explained in an interview, quote, "We screen tested 3 or 4 women, and I still couldn't make up my mind. I said to myself, who is Annie? Annie is spunky. Amy is spunky. Amy is Annie, end quote, and end of casting. Finally, after many, many hours of auditions and callbacks and cross-country trips, they had their cast. Now it was time to assemble, one and all. And where did they decide to assemble for their first cast read-through? A church.
The Franklin Methodist Church over in Hollywood.
Wow, has somebody talked about the church?
Yeah, the Methodist Church in Hollywood. Yeah, I do remember.
Do you remember the read-through at the church?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh yeah, that was phenomenal.
The Methodist Church was known for religious and spiritual services, but also for rehearsing Broadway plays. And table reads were a common occurrence. Once a cast was assembled, they'd come together around a table and read through the script just to get a feel for the story, the dialogue, and how the characters interacted. From Marjorie Simkin.
One of my very most fun memories of working on the movie was when we did the read through. They all decided she was too young to do the read through, because that's when you just sit around the table and everybody reads the script out loud, and Phil can get a sense of what's working, what's not working, once you've cast people. And so I got to read Gabby's part in the read through, and I got to read opposite James Earl Jones. It was thrilling.
And from Dwyer Brown.
I was excited to be a part of it. And as an actor, I didn't want to take a, Polaroid with me to the first read through and, hey, Burt Lancaster, do you mind if I take a picture with you? You're supposed to be cool. Like you do this all the time. So yeah, I mean, it was, the whole thing was a thrill.
And from Charles Hoyes, who played Chicago White Sox shortstop Swede Risberg in the film.
I didn't even know Ray Liotta yet, and I hadn't met Kevin, and I didn't know they were in it.
How big was it? Like, how many people were there? Like you said, it was at a church.
There were about 30 people there, and everybody was there. But everybody was there. I'm sitting there in the reading, and it's like Ray Liotta's sitting here, but like Burt Lancaster's sitting there. James Earl Jones is sitting next to me. I said, man, I'm like, this was Elmer Gantry, and I get Darth Vader sitting, and Kevin, Kevin's there, and so we start to read the thing. We get done about an hour and 15 minutes later, because the read goes fast, even though you're trying to put a little in Phil Robinson, the director / writer, he goes like this. He looks around the room and goes, holy shit. Do you feel that? Everybody's like tingling. That's holy shit. Man, I'll see you in Iowa, and on the, fueled and fed with that. Like once we got there, and it was
wow.
It was pretty, and amazing things were happening the entire time we were shooting. Stuff. Amazing is overused. Impressive. Okay, I'll just say impressive things were happening throughout the whole shoot.
Some of these impressive, magical moments from the shoot included gathering 6,000 cars and thousands more people for one final massive aerial shot. Another magical moment occurred when the crew and cast stumbled upon the movie's central character written on an actual tombstone near one of the shoots. But one of the most impressive moments was when production manager Brian Frankish saved the film during a terrible drought by thinking far outside the box.
In every motion picture insurance policy, there are things that you can insure. So when we were putting together the insurance policy, I got this idea. I said, what's one of the most important performers I have on screen in this film? And I said, it's the corn. So I called the insurance company and I said, what'll it cost to put a rider on the corn? And when the rain was not coming, I sent these Polaroids into the insurance company, and I said, I want to open a claim. I've got a sick actor that's his name is CORN.
Next time on the Midnight Library of Baseball presents The Making of Field of Dreams. The show is produced and edited by me, Ben Orlando. Music by Sergei Papkin and Ashot Danielyan. Good night.